next hour.
You're with Lembit Opik on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for being with me here at the home of free speech, today's News Talk TNT. I'm Lembit Opik, and in this hour, we're going to be talking to an independent candidate, which means a person who's depending entirely on his own steam to get elected in the general election. He doesn't have a massive party machine behind him. I've stood as an independent, but not for Parliament. I did that in student politics, and boy, it's an uphill struggle. So we'll be speaking to Keith Tordoff, MBE, about why he's doing it, what he's standing for, and what he's hoping to achieve. We'll be talking about finance and politics with expert Dr. Roger Gewolb, who will be joining us for his unique and Franco-American take on the British general election. So the view from the outside, even though he's very much on the inside in the UK, he's great value as always. And then new figures show that we're selling tens of billions of pounds worth of military hardware, wait for it, to China, our arch enemies. That's the arch enemy that we buy everything back from, of course, because we exported all our CO2 production and all the profits from that CO2 production to the manufacturing base in China. And then we're surprised that they're doing well and they're the second largest economy in the world. Anyway, we're apparently selling the military stuff too. What is going on there? Warren Thornton, who's the nearest I know to a military sleuth, will be joining us about that as well. And of course, we got our very own Gemma Cooper in just a few minutes talking about the things that she spotted that you need to know about at the beginning of the week, this is the beginning of the week also in Australia. Before we go to Gemma, though, a couple of points I want to follow up. One is this question about whether you can really trust what we're being told by election polls. I was speaking to Professor Russell Deacon in the first hour about that. And here's how I see it. You could probably fix one or two polls. You might be able to buy someone off to give them enough money to make a sample that suits your needs. But you can't do it hundreds of times. And it's pretty obvious that Reform UK, which Professor Deacon rightly points out, is a development from an older party, the Brexit Party and the UK Independence Party in a way as well. Well, they've been around a while, but there's no doubt they're doing really well. They'll be second or third in the popular vote. What amuses me is the Conservatives in particular are saying, oh, Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, he's got no place in British democracy. That incensed me when I heard that on the mainstream media. I think it was yesterday. Because when Philip Hammond said it, I thought, how dare you? How dare you say that somebody who will unquestionably attract millions of votes across the country with over 600 members of parliamentary candidates to be members of parliament, how dare you say that he somehow shouldn't be in the democratic system? But here is the subtle but obvious point when I make it. That's what they do. Rather than taking on the argument, in this case, it's about Nigel Farage saying it was outrageous that we don't take some responsibility for the problems in Ukraine. Rather than doing that, he simply says this man should be cancelled, because that's what he is saying. Methinks that means Philip Hammond and the Conservatives have no serious argument against what Nigel Farage is saying. Rock on, Nigel, keep saying it. Whether you're right or wrong isn't the point. What matters here is you're giving an alternative view and you're bringing them to account. This leads me to my second brief point. There's another culprit in all of this. They don't tend to slam the Reform UK party because the Reform UK party is mainly a problem for the Conservatives. But it's Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer agrees with Philip Hammond and with Rishi Sunak. They're all in it together when it comes to the situation in Ukraine. There's not a cigarette paper's thickness bit of difference about what Prime Minister Starmer's going to do versus what Rishi Sunak did. Now, if you got Nigel Farage as the Prime Minister, or for that matter, George Galloway, who is head of the Workers' Party of Britain, everything would change. And I would imagine we get into negotiations pretty quickly. Here's a scenario I want to give to you folks. It's a juicy one. Imagine Donald Trump in the United States treating Nigel Farage as the people's prime minister. And maybe this next part is too fanciful to happen, but also treating George Galloway as the voice of the left. That would make Keir Starmer to some extent impotent with all the millions of people who vote for Reform UK. I like the idea of it because maybe, just maybe, we would end up with the sweet irony that the two party leaders or people in charge of their movements, Donald Trump and Nigel Farage, could end up being the peacemakers who go down in history as the ones who got it right. Who knew? You heard it first here with Lembit, Opik on today's News Talk. We're going to go to Gemma Cooper next. I'm going to ask her what she thinks of my theory too. All of that here on TNT.
It's the stuff.
It's that division
People are talking about.
and that cluelessness that they want to push.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Gemma Cooper, I've been working on my little theory over the weekend that Trump and Farage could end up going down in history as two of the greatest peacemakers of the early 21st century. What do you think?
It's a distinct possibility because just as you were talking there, saying how Farage, as he once again united the Uni Party, they've rounded on him. Just in the last hour, Boris Johnson has taken to X, Twitter, where you've got 11,000 followers and counting, and a blue tick, Lembit. I don't know if you know that, but he's taken to X to really, launch a scathing attack on Farage for his comments about Ukraine and Russia and how NATO and the West are the aggressors. He said he's promoting Putin lies. His comments over the weekend, which he doubled down on, were morally repugnant, nauseating, ahistorical drivel. Nobody poked the bear with a stick, and Zelensky can and will defeat Russia. Ukraine will prevail. He's really come out in a quite blistering statement on X. You can go and see the whole thing over there if you're inclined. But I think it does show the level of fear which the parties are now looking at the polls. As you rightly say, you maybe can rig one or two. You can maybe skew a poll in your favor, but they're all coming out saying how many votes Reform is garnering. And also, you can't deny the lived experience of seeing Nigel Farage on the campaign trail and seeing the reaction he's getting, especially from young people who maybe just like a bit of character in their politicians. And the new generation coming up has very different ideas in the UK about all kinds of things. Work is one of them. Politics is another. We're clearly seeing he's garnering support. So, yeah, they're doubling down on their attacks. Nigel is doubling down on his position. He won't back down. He won't do the council thing. He won't apologize and say, I didn't really mean it. Sorry for any upset. He's like, no, I stand by what I believe in and I'm saying it. So this is a different game, isn't it? Where he's not towing the establishment line.
I've been asked a few times in the weekend, particularly because of comments I made last week, what I think about standing for Parliament. I would again now, because it's got interesting again. I wouldn't have said yes 3 months ago because I thought we were just sinking into a quagmire of self-emasculating disaster from the old parties. But now it's got interesting again. And it's because people like Farage are actually wanting to have a grown-up debate about stuff, about net zero, which is a pile of rubbish, about this woke trans agenda, which seems to be once again occupying and distracting Starmageddon, and now about Ukraine. Long may this last, actually. And that's why you never know. You and I could end up on the green benches together. How about it?
I don't know about that, but a credible opposition is what has been lacking in UK politics for so many years now. We saw it absolutely in full force during the scandemic 4 years, where there was absolutely no opposition at all to government policy from the so-called opposition. In fact, the opposition was worse than the government, calling for harder, faster lockdowns and more stringent measures, which is very, very worrying indeed. Should Labour get this dictatorship victory that all the so-called polls are pointing towards. The only consideration, I think, think, and we've discussed this before, is Farage some kind of pressure cooker valve release for people who are becoming more increasingly anti-establishment in the UK and anti-authoritarian? And that's no bad thing at all. Is he there to let off some collective steam? People are saying, well, he's one of us. We don't need to kind of do as much activism or rallying of our own because he's going to represent us. Is he? Is he? Or is this a very clever trick by the establishment to parachute him in and make people think, like us, that there is somebody there fighting our corner? I don't know. It's just speculation on my part. But certainly it is entertaining. And Boris Johnson feeling he's had to come, be launched into the mix, nauseating, ahistorical drivel. It was not long ago that he was accused of stoking the wars of Ukraine. There was a ceasefire called for, and he said, no, let's keep going. Let's keep funding them.
That's exactly the point I was going to make. We'll go to your stories in just a moment. Boris Johnson is said to have flown over to Ukraine to talk Zelensky out of declaring a peace with Russia. It's just and if that can be proved unequivocally, that would be his worst contribution internationally, as his mismanagement of COVID was his worst contribution domestically. Because then he's got blood in his hands, hasn't he? Absolutely, yes. And I wonder if his taskmasters have told him this morning, go on X, issue this statement against Farage. You were the one that was in the helm when it all started. Go in and try and destroy this particular narrative. Trouble is, we live in a very different world now where people can, excuse me, and do go off and look at things for themselves. And we have a lot of citizen journalists who go to Ukraine and go to these places and put their own reports out. The genie is out of the bottle in terms of information and how quickly people can access information now. And the mainstream and the establishment is definitely running scared. Hence this very juvenile and slightly desperate launch by Johnson in the last hour on X to discredit Farage. But too many people know the actual reality of the situation. So the narrative can't be controlled anymore. And we see them trying to control it. It has made it interesting. You're quite right. Farage has made it interesting. I just wonder, with my little, it's not a tinfoil hat, it's just a bit of journalistic skepticism. Is it orchestrated so that people feel represented? That's my only question. Interesting. Just one other thing I'll say. We'll whiz through your other stories in a moment. Boris Johnson, I think, has been a bad choice here because Boris has had his day, and Farage and Boris occupy the same space in a way, but Boris got booted out, and now it's not credible for the Tories to want Boris to be back in after they got rid of him in the first place, and the public didn't really want that. And also, Boris, people, do they take his comments seriously? They regard him as a fun guy, but I'm not sure they regard him as a serious commentator. Wonder what you think.
Well, I don't know. Clearly, the Conservatives, or whatever they are, the Uniparty, thinks that it will have an impact. Will it, or is it just, people just like flick over and think we're not really interested? That's a very good point that you make. But I think it's worth having a look at the statement that he's put out in full. As I say, he's done it this morning. He's obviously been Monday morning. I can't imagine Boris Johnson's bright and breezy, let's just say. And he's supposed to be on holiday, isn't he? They've packed him off on a second summer break and weren't going to bring him back on the campaign trail. Well, this looks like very much he kind of is. I very much he's done this on his own bat. I think he's been told. Will people pay attention there? That's a good point.
Well, do you want to whiz through anything else before we move on? I've got to go to Roger.
Just a couple of headlines. I mean, you talked there about the gender debate, which is firmly back on the Labour Party agenda. Keir Starmer's going to a school today where he's going to be quizzed on Labour plans to reverse a policy that's only just been brought in, where children won't be able to question their gender in school, and teachers will be telling them there are only two sexes, male and female. Labour is going to reverse all of that if they get into power. He's going to be at a school today, surrounded by children, telling them they can be whatever they want. Wonderful, fantastic. And also the delays, they do continue at Manchester Airport. The flights are not back to normal yet. Thousands of passengers still facing rescheduled flights. I wonder if this is some kind of anti-travel narrative. We're seeing a lot about deaths on foreign islands recently in the UK. Now a continued assault on British airports. Birmingham airports had huge delays last week, and now Manchester. So I think there's some kind of anti-travel rhetoric here. Travel experts are saying that people are losing confidence in the airport industry and maybe won't travel as much. That fits into an agenda. I think it's 2030, not long now.
I'll just tell you, over the weekend, I published on X, I'm really getting into it, a new test for scientific literacy. If you can read the phrase, there is no climate emergency, you're doing fine. If you can't read it, then you can get a government grant for junk science and you can advise ministers. Anyway, thanks very much indeed, Gemma Cooper. It's rhetorical. It's rhetorical. We've probably both lost any chance of getting in the millions now to making people panic. Somebody else who won't make you panic but will make you think is Dr. Roger Gowalp. He's going to join us with his unique Franco-American take on the British general election. You have your say as well. I'll read some of your comments out in just a moment. All of this with me, Lembit, Opik, right here on TNT. See you in a minute.
TNT's Kate Shemirani.
Back in the day when I was nursing, I remember in the 80s, and I can't remember these nurses' names. Of course I can't. They used to take things like frusemide out the cupboard, laxatives out the cupboard, so that they'd pee and poo, so that they'd be really slim on a Saturday night when they went out night clubbing. Nurses, when they were going on holiday, it was an overnight flight, would take temazepam back in the day. But now, of course, they've got cameras everywhere. And just remember, we've already got one Patsy, Lucy Letby, and who's been denied an appeal. I can tell you there are thousands of nurses behind her. Guess what? You're all Lucy Letby, you're all Julian Assange, and they're coming for your behinds.
Kate Shemirani on today's News Talk, TNT. A better business tip from TNT Radio. One reason people tune in to TNT Radio is often because they're loyal to a specific show or personality. Our personalities have been a part of people's daily routine, and people continue to tune in. They trust TNT Radio and are highly engaged with the content. If you'd like more information about advertising on TNT Radio, simply fill out your details on our contact page and we'll be in touch. To find out more, go to tntradio.live.
Facts and truth.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
A few comments coming in here. Holly says, I'm going to the hustings in the church tonight to watch the pantomime. Oh, no, you're not. Questions pre-submitted and controlled yawn. Holly, here's my advice. For any candidate who claims a climate emergency, ask them all what percentage of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide. If they say 0.04%, which is right, then say, how can the tiny human contribution to that be driving climate? And if they don't know, and they probably won't know, force them to say a figure and they'll make fools of themselves. That's what I think. Flashdance wants to be banned on TNT. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just my glasses again. No one takes Boris seriously, Lembit, says Holly. Well, that could be the case. I certainly think that they're desperate when they're bringing these people out. Next, they'll have Liz Truss coming out saying you can't trust Labour with the economy. That's maybe the next thing. And just one more. Starmer is an anti-British, anti-Christian, neo-Marxist, says Hemingway, and anybody who can't see that is clearly going to vote Labour. I wonder if you're the same Hemingway that I followed on X yesterday. I'm not sure about that. Holly says, she thinks I should come along to the hustings. I would if I could, Holly. Can't do it tonight, but I would love to do some hustings and heckle. Somebody who needs no heckling, just needs space for his great insights is Dr. Roger Gowalp, an election guru, no less. Roger, how are you doing?
Very well. Thank you, Lembit.
So lots to talk about here. Let's start with an open question. What do you think were the most significant developments over the weekend in terms of the 4th of July general election?
I suppose it has to be Nigel Farage and Putin. I think that's far ahead of anything else in Nigel's response and the public's response and the media's response. And I think I'd put second after that the unbelievable lack of response to the unbelievable Bailey-osaurus, the governor of the Bank of England, leaving interest rates where they are, crushing British homes and businesses even further. And nobody, I mean, Labour could, he's so wrong. It's just so wrong the last year and a half. Even the House of Lords, even more than that, Bailey's crony Bernanke, whom he brought over to the States to back him up and who shopped him and said this place is incompetent. Everybody in the world has said that Bailey and the Bank of England has made a total mess of interest rates, controlling inflation, and British monetary policy. What a weapon for Labour or Ed, the postman never rings even once, Davy, to say, what is wrong with you guys? And there's not a peep. So I think those are the two big stories.
That just on the first one, I definitely want to talk about the mysterious strategic decisions being made by Ed Davey's team, head of the Liberal Democrats. But on the first one, everyone that I've spoken to about this, let me put it the other way, no one I've spoken to has been able to explain why they didn't cut interest rates this time. Everyone seemed to expect it, or at least I certainly did, and I studied economics to a fairly senior level. Why didn't they do it? Why didn't they cut interest rates? Was it a politically charged decision?
I think that's really hard to tell. I mean, of course, a lot of people are going to make big money from continuing interest rates where they are. Banks, energy companies, all sorts of big vested interests are going to make money. Whether there are deals going on there, who knows? People with a lot of cash in the bank like you are going to favor that. Because they get more money on their savings. And the Tories may figure that their voting base, most of which they have probably lost by now, is going to at least be placated and kept happy by having a higher interest rate on their savings. So they went for that rather than easing the burden on the lower paid, more common of the 68 million of us like me. That's the political motivation. But my personal view is, and my personal opinion is that this is exactly what Andrew Bailey did when he was running the Financial Conduct Authority. And it has been alleged that hundreds of billions of pounds were lost, or many billions of pounds, I don't know how many, by investors in the Woodford and the London and Capital scandals, where the FCA acted too late or not at all. So it's the same pattern.
And therefore, you're essentially saying there's vested interest, partly political and, well, it is political, but partly financial. But that would suggest there isn't independence in the Bank of England. What's the point of having a Bank of England that can set the interest rate when they're not independent anyway in that case? Because I've always thought that the chancellor should be setting the interest rate rather than giving it to some third party.
Well, Gordon Brown gave the Bank of England virtual independence in 1997. The House of Lords Economic Affairs Committee said a few months ago that their software is obsolete, their methods are obsolete and out of date. They suffer from groupthink. They think diversity is having Black women and LGTB plus, blah, 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 blah people. Not diversity is having people who think other than you do, because they don't have any of those but one. And well, no, it's true. It is. It's so sad. It's almost a laughing matter, but it is true. He gave them their virtual independence. The House of Lords said maybe we should look at taking this away. This is Bailey. This is independent. This is Bailey being stubborn. This is the Bailey-osaurus. I'm going to keep. I'm fighting. I'm fighting inflation. Yes, but sir, and your friends at the watering hole here, I've brought you each a copy of Economics for Dummies, and Chapter 1 says that when you have non-consumer demand inflation, what economists call cost push inflation, you can't control food and energy prices and Houthis shooting at shipping in the Red Sea by making the cost of the overdraft of Joe the plumber in Bangor more. There's no correlation. Why are you doing this? And you just get a blank big rhino stare.
Right. I like the way you describe it. I have very low opinions about any government's capability in running an economy. I think the economies work when the governments take their hands off the levers, but that's for another time.
I'm afraid I have a very low opinion of any government running anything.
But it does seem that they can majestically blow billions for no benefit in a way that no sensible business would ever imagine doing.
Absolutely. Just spend time in Westminster. Spend time in Westminster, and if you want to see Westminster on steroids, go to Brussels for the day.
I've done that, and I could tell you some horror stories there. One time I actually won an argument. I thought that was easy, and I felt that the whole place was run on a whim. It was to my advantage, but I thought, hang on, you've just accepted my data, and that's it. Is that how the whole of European Union is run? Answer, probably yes.
It's a giant drinks party, Lembit.
Does look like it. A gravy train, I think, is the other way of looking at it. Just you mentioned Ed Davey. Now, Ed Davey is the leader of the Liberal Democrats, and he's decided to present himself as the famous clown Charlie Caroli, doing stunts all the time. My view is, if he was playing this seriously with his doe-eyed sincerity, and he can do that quite well, they could be the official opposition. They might still end up being the official opposition, but they'd have more seats. But because he's been clowning around, that will put off some of the Conservatives who'll instead drift off towards Farage.
Yes, very likely. I mean, I can't believe that Ed, the postman, doesn't even ring once Davey is even still around.
This is the incredible thing, because he's now been in trouble, and what you're referring to is the fact that he was the post office minister when Alan Bates, the spokesman basically for all the wrong postal workers who were prosecuted under false pretenses, essentially, he refused to meet Alan Bates. He could have been a hero. He could have been a hero. Sure. But instead, he says himself, "Oh, I trusted my advisors." Come on, man.
Yeah.
I don't dislike the guy, but what a mistake. What an error.
I'm amazed they've kept him as their leader, because he's pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, he's pretty
Be careful.
Yeah. He's pretty unsuitable given that track record to be leading a political party. And when he was asked, he's never explained it adequately. That's the problem.
And the other thing he hasn't explained is why he voted again. He voted to introduce tuition fees when he promised not to. Under Nick Clegg, and I stood on this manifesto, there's a solemn promise to oppose tuition fees, and then he voted for them. He just can't explain it. That's the problem. This is the golden opportunity for the Lib Dems. They could still get a record number of seats, but they could have been the opposition. And even if they get to the opposition, they could have been even bigger.
Isn't it funny that they've missed that and Labour has missed the opportunity? I mean, if I were Keir the Fear Starmer, I would be on the doorsteps of the Bank of England, with orange paint screaming my head off at this latest and even before continued crushing fueling of the cost of living crisis. Why don't they say, why doesn't Rachel, whom I call citation required, as in Wikipedia, why doesn't Rachel citation required Reeves say something?
Because you're, as always, overestimating the quality of the people that we might be governed by after the next election. That's an opinion. And I'm very grateful for yours. That is Dr. Roger Gold. I wonder what you think about what he said. Do have your say. Just going to the chat just for a moment. Ed Davey is positively creepy, says Holly. Very interesting point there. Lembit, what do you think about the missiles into Crimea sortie? I have a very, very bad feeling about that. I'm going to be talking about that with my final guest today. So not the next guest, but the guest but one, Warren Thornton, because it is a very serious situation, all tone. So I will ask about that. But we thank Roger Gewalt. But next, we're going to speak to somebody who does want to be in Parliament, somebody who has a long tradition of working West Yorkshire Police, has stood for Police and Crime Commission and did pretty well, actually. That's Keith Tordoff. All of that with me, Lembit Opik, right here on TNT.
And here's the news. Extra.
TNT Radio News.
Matt Boyland here with a look at your TNT headlines. Australia's ABC has been accused of censoring an interview with a world-renowned nuclear expert who took a blowtorch to the public broadcaster's anti-nuclear narrative. Support is growing in Australia to ban children and teenagers under the age of 16 from accessing social media. And Germany has blamed Russia for its worsening ties with China, saying trade between Berlin and Beijing is deteriorating due to China's relations with Moscow.
Are you enjoying listening to TNT Radio?
Do you think we're doing a good job?
Then please let us know. Why not leave us a like or a positive review or comment on Facebook, Gab, or Getter? Help us get the word out as we cover the biggest topics of our time on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
Welcome back. Now, I've done my share of standing for Parliament. In fact, I've done it 5 times, 3 times successfully. My next guest has also stood in big elections before. He's also spent 20 years with West Yorkshire Police. That's a pretty big police force in the United Kingdom, and in all kinds of commendations, actually, and working on major cases, including murders. Well, now he's turning his skills to standing as an independent in the general election. His name's Keith Tordoff, and he was thought of highly enough to get an MBE, which is that member of the British Empire, Keith?
A member of the Order of the British Empire.
So why isn't it MOBE then?
You better ask King Charles as he is now.
All right, well, I better not go down that path. That could be treason. I was accused of treason by a friend of mine in the weekend. So I better not go down that path. You've got an illustrious career and at a very high level in policing. And you also stood for Police and Crime Commission and Fire Commission, I think, as well. Why are you standing as an independent for Parliament now?
When I first joined the police force, we were always told you must remain independent. You can't be part of a political party. And that's really stuck with me. So I am independent because therefore you can represent everybody. And equally, that's the important thing in society. And I've never been a councillor, never stood to be an MP until now. As you mentioned, I've previously stood to be Police Fire Crime Commissioner of North Yorkshire in 2021. And in May this year, I stood to be Mayor of York and North Yorkshire. So independent to me is it's time we need better representation, and the political party way where MPs are whipped to vote a certain way. We need people who will work with all the different parties, but also will speak for the people and speak from their own mouth rather than the mouth that they're being told to by the political party.
Now, that means that you've got to basically be your own campaign manager, not exactly, but your own party whip, your own policy maker. What are your policies? What are you standing for?
Localism rather than the globalism, that's an important one. Obviously, with the police background very much against crime and antisocial behaviour, every crime should matter. They're not being investigated correctly. They're not being detected. So we've got a horrendous thing. Supporting our farmers, without farmers, we haven't got any food. And certainly there seems to be a tax on the farmers. And things supporting businesses. I've got a track record, again, as a volunteer in the community. And this is partly why I got awarded the MBE. Was because I was chair voluntary of the Chamber of Trade, the chair of Bloomwood, local things where we involve children from schools, the elderly in the community, the churches in the area, and basically pull people together, doing things to improve things. And certainly as chair of the Chamber of Trade, the Conservative government ran a scheme called the Great British High Street Awards, and I led a team which ultimately won the national title, the best high street in the whole country, at a time when high streets have been declining. And I went on to do Bloom, where the local council said that the categories had changed and we couldn't win it as an area. And I went against that and basically entered it with a team of volunteers again from all around the community. We won the very top national title, Britain in Bloom. So I've got an attitude that it can be done. We haven't relied on funding. No government funding for any of these things, purely from a point of getting the spirit of the community and philanthropy. You know, it's too many people make it corporate. Philanthropy can be at a local level with people who just want to help.
Yes, I stood when I was in a student political environment, I stood as an independent. I was quite successful. I was actually even offered a very senior job in the student world by the parties, or the main party. But I found it quite lonely. And I wonder if you're missing a trick by not joining a party, because you'd get snapped up, surely. You've got all these skills. So I wonder if after this time, if you don't win, and maybe you will win, you should join a party, because it'll give you more firepower.
First of all, I'm in it to win it. I wouldn't do it otherwise, as I have on other occasions. I'm a great believer in a positive spirit. I wake up, fortunately, every day looking to be positive. I don't want my voice and my views to be neutered. I'm a great believer in freedom of speech. I've been in organisations such as the police for over 20 years, and actually after that worked for a major bank for over 10 years as a senior fraud investigator. And I find that your voice is very much institutionalized. And I don't want to be that person. I want to be that, in a way, a bit of a free spirit, but working with people, as I've shown I can do in communities, in organizations such as the police. I was a firearms team leader. So people have to have trust in you. But I think it's important that I can still retain that voice, and whatever words come out of my mouth are my words and not the party, as I've been told I've got to, or generally to stay in that party. And I'm very fortunate. I've worked hard all my life. I started off working in 15 years of age in Leeds Market, serving fruit and veg in Yorkshire, and West Yorkshire Police in Yorkshire, etc. So, yeah, I'd always look at anything. I never rule anything out, and it'd be very interesting. I want to make change. I want to make a better life for people. No, everybody should have a roof over their head. Everybody should have food, and everybody should have some money in their pocket. And if we aren't achieving that, we aren't doing our job.
So that sounds worthy. It also sounds rather more authentic than the tosh I've been listening to in the leaders' debates, to be blunt, between Starmer and Sunak. You can't tell them apart. Starnak, really. What are your chances of winning?
As you said, it's very difficult against the main party, especially in the area. I mean, Skipton and Ripon is very much a traditional Tory Conservative seat, which they give us a safe seat, usually as MP. Our current MP has held it since 2010, who is Conservative. I first met him in 2010 when he came from London, asked my advice as somebody locally who knew the area, who knew the people, knew the business, if I could introduce him, which I did, because I wanted to get positive things for it. They start off lovely people, and no doubt they are still nice people in their own right, but they somehow get swallowed up into that Westminster bubble. They suddenly take second jobs. They're suddenly working for other people, consultancies, advisors, etc. And they lose sight, I think, of why they went into politics, which was to actually do good and serve the people. So do I stick a chance? I'll keep trying. I'm totally self-funded, so I don't ask any donations or anything else, because I want to also be not responsible for anybody who maybe thinks they're going to get something from it. I act without fear or favour, and very straightforward Yorkshireman, say it as it is, but I also deliver and do it, and that's the proven track record. So I've delivered bus services to the area when people said bus services wouldn't work in rural areas. I've been involved in environmental projects, wildflower meadows, etc. So mine is a case of delivering, but I do it by leading and showing that it can be done, and people enjoy that movement once they realise that when they see me sweeping the whole road, not just outside my own premises, when they see me getting me leaf blower out and blowing the full length of the high street, people stop and ask you, can I help? And that's how it starts. So I'm a great believer in can I win? I've got to win, and then I can make it huge. If I've done all that I've done, which is a fair amount, it sounds like blowing my own trumpet, but if I've done a fair amount without any funding, without being paid for doing it, can you imagine what I can do if I'm actually paid to do it, and I can organise people who will recognise me as that local MP? I think I could do a massive amount for this area.
So I'll just read a quick comment, and then I want to ask you a final question. Rachel Reeves, who's the shadow chancellor, that means she's in the Labour Party, recently claimed on a salary of something like 84,000 a year, I think it might be more than that she often finds herself a bit short at the end of each month, despite having a husband who earns even more. Nice. Labour for you, comrade.
Well, they shouldn't be running the economy if you can't budget better than that. And the expenses on top of it, and the expense on top of it, and the funding from various groups, around the world. So I'll just leave it there. But they're a disgrace to these people. Disgrace.
If I was a millionaire, I wouldn't live very differently to the way I do now, but I certainly wouldn't rub people's noses in it. I still wear old trousers and drive an old 21-year-old car. For her to say that as the Labour chancellor, potentially ludicrous. Final question for you. I don't think that human beings are wrecking the climate. I don't think there's a climate emergency. Where do you stand on this?
I think that it's a corporate agenda. I think that there's a lot of people making huge amounts of money from it. They shouldn't be flying around in the private jets telling us how to run our lives. We need to look at localism, not globalism. Use local farmers, use local food, supply it to the schools, good nutrition for the children, so when they go to school, they've actually got sort of energy because they've had a good breakfast, etc. We've got it all wrong. When I was at school, we used to get milk to drink. Guess why we got milk? Because it had all the nutrients in to make sure that we could concentrate, have a good day in school. I didn't leave with any qualifications, mind you, but that's another story. I liked messing around, I suppose, at school. So the net zero thing, it's an agenda, and we need to. We all want to preserve nature. We all want to have a beautiful surrounding, but I think we can do that without people who are making billions of pounds from this agenda. So we need to wake up, and I'm hoping people are waking.
Well, given Hemingway's comment about Rachel Reeves being a little bit short with 84 grand and a rich husband, perhaps they can afford to be green. Maybe that's what it is. A cult or a hobby to sate your guilt. Hey, well, good luck. Thanks very much. We'll find out soon enough if you get elected, and no doubt we'll have you on again as well. Where can people find out more about your campaign if they want to find out more?
I've got a website which is www.keithtordofmbe.co.uk. That's the best way. My phone number's on there, but I'm happy for even people to ring me on an evening or weekend because I'm an open book. So please feel free to contact me. But the website's most probably best to read a little bit about me, find out a bit about me, and be able to contact me through my email, which is info@keithtordofmbe.co.uk.
That is great. Thank you, Keith. Good luck on your mission. And the torch is passing to a new generation of Yorkshiremen. Who knew? You and Rishi Sunak together.
Well, I'm not on £1 million a week as he is, but with his investments. But thank you for inviting me to join TNT Radio. Lembit, it's been a pleasure. And yes, I hope I'm speaking to you shortly as MP for Skipton and Ripon. Absolutely. I'll come and you can buy me a coffee in the house if you want. I'll show you around for that. We'll buy you a pie and give you some sweets. Independent, remember. Independent. As long as you got mustard too. Thanks so much indeed. That's Keith Tordoff, MBE. Coming up next, we're going to answer a couple of the questions in the chat about the missiles that hit Crimea. And also, there's another even more ominous question, really, in there as well. Warren Thornton's going to be joining us. He's a military expert. All of that with me, Lembit right here on TNT. See you in a minute.
From weather and traffic reports to news of political developments, we turn to journalists for the information we need to live our daily lives.
Journalists around the world provide news that is essential for democracy,
for personal freedom, and for safety and stability.
Yet their ability to report freely and safely is under attack like never before.
Too many journalists are paying with their lives. They face exponential risks and they've already paid a heavy toll.
Death threats, online harassment, and physical attacks
are becoming a daily experience of journalists in all countries.
We just want people to be safe, to be able to get our readers the information that they need to make informed decisions.
They checked my phone and realized that it was Pegasus. I feel myself like I'm naked at the street.
These charges were politicized from the start.
Facts win. Truth wins. Justice wins.
C'est énorme pour moi d'être là, d'être libre, surtout que je ne m'y attendais pas du tout.
Stand with a free press.
Stand with journalists whose reporting won't be silenced. Press freedom is your freedom.
Whatever happened to good? It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and it's become our automatic answer to so much.
Hey, how's things?
Good.
Your mum, your weekend?
Good. Is good even that good anymore? At the Salvos, we believe good deserves better. Let's reclaim its true meaning. To us, good has always been about making a difference, and good never picks or chooses who it helps. Isn't it time we all remember what good really means?
Lembit, Opik. This is the Lembit Opik Show on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
Lots of comments coming through. Good on you, Keith. That's the Keith Torder from Johnny Dollar. Craig Abath. So, Keith, what are you saying? Politicians become corrupted? Surely not. Holly says good luck to Keith, as does Craig Abath and many others as well. So let's go to some of the questions which you're asking, and let's set the scene. The UK authorised the sale of £25.5 billion worth of military equipment to China. Yes, it's China. Apparently, the figures were published this month by the Department for Business and Trade. That makes China the UK's biggest destination above Ukraine and Israel for military-related equipment in the whole world in 2023, despite the government imposing an arms embargo on, you guessed it, China, which came into effect in May 2022. What on earth is going on? Well, one person might be able to explain that is Warren Thornton, who joins us now. Warren, thanks for joining us again on TNT. How have you been?
I've been absolutely fine, thank you. We've been working hard here at warrenthornton.com. We're chasing down all the stories everybody wants to hear.
Let me just ask you, before we go into the China story, just a couple from the chat, and you're in a good place to raise them. One is from Ortone. What do you think about the missiles into Crimea's story? I have a very, very, very bad feeling about that. Made no sense. Bombing bathers and kids, really? I understand, Warren, that one of the missiles were sent to Crimea. The one that killed the civilians was disintegrated above the beach. But what is going on there? And are they really Western hardware?
Yes, they are Western hardware. They launched 5 ATACMS. 4 of them were taken out. 4 of them were taken out, and one of them actually managed to get through. Now, it's a moot point whether or not it was taken out by the Russians or it actually landed on the beach. Ukraine have a previous history of this. In 2015, they bombed a beach called Zugres Beach, and they were waiting for everybody for the holiday period so that they could bomb them, and they killed many children. There is actually a monument to what happened there in 2015, which is exactly the same as happened here. Cluster munitions dropped on bathers, men, women and children who were on a beach. And there is a memorial called the Alley of Angels in the Donbass to that. So this is just a repeat of what happened 9 years ago.
Other question here. It's a long question, but truthful, I'll ask, why did you leave the frontline army? Make some suggestions. I don't want to read them out because I don't know enough about the subject. But is there a particular reason that you left the army?
Yeah, but we were told that we would be able to go to various places and do various reports, and we didn't want to sell anything. We just wanted to give people the proper news. So that's why we decided to go it alone and stand on our own just as a news outlet at warrenthornton.com.
Okay, so let's get into so there's your answer. There's more to it in the chat. He says more, but I don't want to get too far away from this story. Seems amazing to me that China is the biggest importer of our weapons when we keep telling the world, that China is the biggest threat. Why is the UK exporting military equipment to China?
Well, it always has been, Lembit. And here's the thing, when the Department of Trade and Business, when you do an embargo, it only mentions certain things. So complete weapon systems you can't sell. However, you can sell such as things as components for helmets, your night sights, you can, the uranium-233, small arms ammo you can sell. And as long as, of course, you don't sell a complete weapon system, they can get it through another area. Now, what you have to remember is this is worth $3 trillion a year to, in terms. Arms companies to China have made 18.5% profit all around the world. Your likes of Boeing, Edge, which is a United Arab Emirates company, and of course, you've got BAE Systems here in Great Britain, which is the biggest seller. Just for instance, Lembit, 2016 to 2020, France sold hundreds of these A-55 Panther helicopters between 1989 and 2020 to China. That was 9.7% of China's spend. And here's the worst one for you. Guess who actually between 2016 and 2020, 6.3% of their arms budget was given to Ukraine, who were then supplying the weapons. So while the Minsk agreements were being roughly ridden over, what they were doing was Ukraine were receiving that weaponry from the West and they were selling it on to China.
Really? They sold it on?
Yes.
Now, if we should tell Nigel Farage, because that rather bolsters his case. China's presented as a threat. If China's such a big threat, why are we selling them weapons? Or maybe they're not such a big threat after all.
It's the former, I'm afraid, Lem. It is necessary, isn't it? You can't just go around bombing people back into the Stone Age. You have to arm them first. And then, of course, those horrible, horrible people who are causing all sorts of trouble in the Philippines, we're going to have to deal with them. And we know that the entire State Department in America has anti-Putin has gone, and now it's anti-China. They've moved all their new people in.
Yeah. It seems, though, that there's an embargo in place. At least in a common sense way, one feels there's an embargo in place. We're endlessly told that China is the great dragon that we have to watch. And yet we seem to be ignoring the embargo. Is anyone actually breaking any rules here, or are the rules just meaningless?
Well, you know what APPGs are, but just for it's an all-party parliamentary group. And then what happens, of course, is they're paid for by the defence contractors, and those defence contractors take them over and they say, look, we need to arm these people because they're in terrible trouble. And you know that only politicians, arms dealers and bankers ever win a war. Then everybody else loses. And of course, they get these free jaunts and nice jobs afterwards. And what happens is this money then goes through. I mean, it's not the first time it's happened. The bankers are involved in this. Do you remember when China and Hong Kong, when Hong Kong was going to become part of China? Well, the HSBC, who are doing the deals at the moment for the money going through China, were the people who froze all the people who were pro-Hong Kong, froze their bank accounts in Hong Kong. And of course, you didn't hear about that, but they froze over 8,000 bank accounts.
8,000?
Yes.
Crazy stuff. As far as I can tell, though, if you just take a common sense view, like I said before, if we're willing to have this massive trade with China on military matters, if they're making all the electric cars that Crazy Horses Dharma wants us to buy, if all the other stuff that we don't make in Britain is pretty much made in China as well, including probably most of my studio, can anyone seriously say we're ever going to go to war against China?
It looks America definitely want to, because they want this conflict. At the end of the day, there's no money in peace. You have to remember that £13 million last year came from the arms industry into the Houses of Parliament in the UK.
I wish I'd known about it. I was deputy chair of the all-party China group. I had a lovely trip to Hong Kong post-reunification. That was about as far as it went. There we go. But finally, because we're nearly out of time, how do you think this plays out? Do you think it'll just carry on as it is?
Yes, of course it will. There are clashes at the moment between Philippines and China, and they are ramping up in the coastal waters. And the Philippines is basically going to be used as a proxy, the same as Ukraine has been used. There has to be conflict somewhere, Lembit, and they're arranging it so that it is. If you arm both sides, everybody in the middle wins. It's a win-win for the arms dealers, bankers, and politicians.
Yes, but to the rest of us, there could just be degrees of losing. Warren, always great to speak with you. War seems to be ever present at the moment. We'll get you back again, I'm sure, before the election. That's Warren Thornton, and unbelievably, we're out of time. Coming up next, we've got Locked and Loaded. Very poignant considering what we discussed with Rick Munn. I'll be back again tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. if you happen to be in the UK, evening if you happen to be in Australia. Big thanks to all of my guests, Warren and co. Big thanks to my team. Biggest thanks to you for watching. Keep chatting and follow me on X, aka Twitter, at Lembit. I got a blue tick. I'll see you tomorrow morning.